It's past midnight again. The house is quiet, but your mind isn't. You've tried settling in the blanket just right, the pillow flipped to the cool side, but sleep still circling somewhere just out of reach. Maybe your thoughts are too loud tonight, looping softly the things you wish you'd said or didn't, the worry you keep tucking under other thoughts, a kind of invisible ache that doesn't hurt exactly, but lingers. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's that background hum of sadness. Maybe it's your nervous system still bracing for something that isn't coming. Or maybe your brain is just busy being a brain fast, sensitive, deeply human. Whatever it is, you're here now. You're safe. And you don't need to sleep yet. You just need rest of the gentle, story-shaped kind. So tonight, let's go back. Not to kings or queens or castles. Not to grand battles or holy quests. Let's return to something much smaller. Let's talk about sneezing and why in medieval Europe a single sneeze could send a village into panic. You open your eyes. You're in a small wooden room lit by a single candle. The air smells like herbs, damp wool, and something faintly sour. A cat is curled in the corner. The fire crackles low. You're bundled in layers, linen wool, maybe something fur-lined. You feel a tickle in your nose. You sniff. It builds. And then, achoo. The woman across from you gasps. The old man by the hearth makes the sign of the cross. The child sitting on the floor shuffles quietly away. Because in this world, a sneeze isn't just a reflex. It's a signal, a warning, a possible death sentence. Medieval doctors, or physicians, if we're being generous, didn't have microscopes, no understanding of germs, no concept of viruses or airborne anything. But they did observe. And one thing they knew, sneezing came before bad things. Plague, fever, collapse, death. So they reasoned quite seriously that sneezing was not only a symptom, but possibly the cause. You sneeze again. The woman presses a cloth to her face. The old man mutters a prayer. The child slips out the door, probably to warn someone. You sit back dazed. A doctor might tell you that your body has been unbalanced, too much heat, or cold, or moisture, or dryness. Perhaps your humors are out of alignment. They might recommend bleeding you, or applying leeches, or shaving your head to let the bad air escape. They mean well. They just don't know yet. And so the sneeze becomes a kind of superstition, a fear, a signal that your soul might be slipping or that the devil is passing too close. Hence, bless you. Not a courtesy, a defense, a warding off, a hope that your sneeze won't be your last breath. But here in this quiet room, nothing happens. You're still breathing, still warm, still here. The cat stretches, the fire settles, the candle flickers. Someone brings you broth, and the moment passes. If this soft, strange story is helping you feel calmer, you're welcome to like or subscribe. Only if it feels gentle to do so. No pressure, no expectations, just ease. So, where are you right now? Lying flat, eyes closed, but not quite still, sitting up in bed, phone glowing softly in the dark, wrapped in a blanket like armor against everything you can't name. However you are, that's okay. Let your breath slow down. Let your shoulders soften. You don't need to fix anything tonight. You just need to rest. Tonight we'll linger in this world of strange fears and ancient medicine, where sneezes were suspect, doctors carried herbs in their pockets, and every cough made people pause. Let's begin. Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the medieval world, a time when a single sneeze could make your neighbors light a candle for your soul. You're lying in your lumpy straw mattress, wrapped in a slightly damp wool blanket, maybe listening to the gentle creak of timber beams above you. There's a chill in the air. You feel it first, that faint tickle behind your nose. Your eyes flutter, your breath catches, and then a chew. Except this isn't a moment for polite sniffles and tissue dabs. In the year 1348, that sneeze might have been your first sign of the end. Back then, people didn't just tolerate sneezes, they feared them. That tiny burst of breath was like a trumpet for death's arrival. God bless you wasn't just polite, it was your last spiritual defense before you potentially dropped dead in the morning. You see, medieval folks had no concept of germs or allergies. They believed in omens, humors, and invisible poisons floating through the air. Sneezing. That was basically shouting, "The plague has entered the building." So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a modest village cobbler in a town that smells faintly of wet hay and something mildly alarming from the butcher's cart. Everyone knows you because you make the only shoes that don't fall apart after 3 weeks. Life is predictable until one day your apprentice sneezes. Just once, but loud. There's a pause. The loom stops spinning. A chicken somewhere lets out a confused squawk. Your neighbor makes the sign of the cross. Someone mutters something about Saint Roche. You squint at your apprentice like you're trying to see the Grim Reaper hiding behind him. That sneeze might have meant he'd caught a chill. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the Black Death. The logic at the time was simple and terrifying. Sneezing was often the first sign of plague. And plague wasn't a lingering, polite illness. It was swift, brutal, and almost certainly fatal. You go from, is my throat a little sore, to I have no pulse in about 3 days. But beyond the threat of disease, people thought sneezing itself was dangerous. Not because of germs, they didn't know what bacteria were, but because they believed your soul could literally be expelled during the sneeze. You know that feeling where a sneeze surprises you and everything clenches. Imagine believing your spiritual essence might have just rocketed out of your nostrils. Not ideal. Some believed that the devil could enter your body during that vulnerable moment. Others thought sneezing was your body trying to reject death, which was already clawing its way inside. No matter how you sliced it, nobody was handing out allergy meds. They were reaching for crosses, garlic, or if they were fancy amber beads soaked in rose oil. There's even a lingering superstition that sneezing 3 times in a row was a surefire sign that you were about to either ascend to heaven or combust. Which one depends on your town's favorite saint and how much you tithed last week. Historians still argue whether the fear of sneezing was more theological or medical. The records are tangled full of contradictions and written by men who also thought frogs in your boots could fix your kidneys. But one thing's clear, a sneeze wasn't just a body function. It was a statement, a declaration of mortality. Of course, not every sneeze spelled doom. Some communities believed sneezing could also be a sign that your body was purging evil, sort of like a natural exorcism with snot. The sneeze might send away demons, but it might also blow your soul across the room and into a pig. You know balance. Your town's physician, he calls himself Master of Humors, though he's really just a guy with a leather pouch of dried herbs and a suspicious mustache, might show up and sniff the air near you. If the room smells sour, he says, "Ah, yes, corrupted vapors," and then recommends you sleep with an onion under your pillow. Not to eat, just to absorb the dark forces, naturally. If things get worse and your sneezing continues, your family might bring in the priest. He'll chant over your bed, sprinkle some holy water, and say that if the sneezes persist beyond a week, you should probably prepare your soul. No pressure. Meanwhile, your apprentice has stopped sneezing, for now. But the panic has already spread. The blacksmith's wife is stuffing rosemary in her bodice. The miller refuses to sell you flour until you stop coughing out omens. And you poor shoemaker that you are, start wondering if it's time to flee to the hills, or at least wear a scarf. The wildest part, some medieval scholars genuinely debated whether sneezes could attract wild animals. There's an actual manuscript suggesting that wolves were drawn to unholy exhalations of the human face, which honestly just sounds like someone blaming their bad luck on being loud in the woods. So, as the sun sets on your little village and the candlelight flickers through thin parchment windows, you lie awake, eyes wide. You try not to breathe too sharply. You suppress a sniffle. And you pray, really pray, that the next time you sneeze, someone's there to say bless you. Because if they're not well, it's been nice knowing you. You wake the next morning still alive, surprising, honestly, considering the whole sneezing incident. The town hasn't lit a pyre in your name, yet. But that faint tickle is back in your nose, and now you're wondering if the air itself is trying to assassinate you. Because here's the thing, medieval doctors didn't fear sneezes entirely on their own. They feared what caused them, namely bad air, miasma. corrupted vapors, invisible poisons floating on the breeze, possibly conjured by witches, swamp ghosts, or sinful thoughts. No one really agreed. What they did agree on, though, was that foul smells were more than unpleasant. They were deadly. You step outside your cottage and immediately regret it. The air smells of dung, smoke, boiled cabbage, and someone nearby enthusiastically tanning leather. A gentle wind carries it all right into your face. Medieval towns weren't known for their sanitation. Sewage drains didn't really exist. Livestock wandered freely. The concept of clean air was more hope than reality. But that smell wasn't just gross. It was dangerous. Doctors believed disease spread through miasma, a kind of noxious air brewed in the swamps, churned in graveyards, or simply belched from the devil's workshop. If your town had a bad air day, people blamed everything from spoiled bread to moral decay. And sneezing. That was your body's desperate attempt to expel this invisible death. Your nose, poor thing, was just trying to save you. One famous 14th century manual instructed townsfolk to perfume the nostrils with warm herbs at sunrise to repel the air's corruption. So, every morning, you sniff crushed sage like it's a medieval version of Vapor-Rub. Your cousin uses cinnamon bark. Your neighbor swears by burning a rat tail over rosemary. The logic was, if your nose is full of good smells, bad ones can't get in. Historians still argue whether these perfuming rituals were symbolic or genuinely thought to be medicinal. Either way, they were elaborate. If someone sneezed near you, you were supposed to turn away, cover your face with a scented cloth, and if you had the money, hold a pomander, a little orb stuffed with spices, herbs, and optimism. You, being a modest shoemaker, have no pomander. Instead, you've stitched together a nose cover from spare leather and filled it with thyme and damp bread crust. It's not exactly fashion forward, but it makes you feel better. Plus, it kind of smells like stew. When someone sneezes in the market, people scatter like startled pigeons. Mothers drag their children away. A few shout, "To the bathhouse," which, by the way, is less relaxing than it sounds. The town bathhouse hasn't been scrubbed since the last king's birthday, and it smells like feet ale and ambition. Still you go. You soak. You scrub. You come out mildly cleaner, but still suspiciously sneezy. That's when it hits you. Maybe it's not just bad air outside. Maybe the inside of your body is brewing the miasma, which is, unfortunately, exactly what your town doctor thinks too. He finds you outside your cottage, dripping and confused. He holds up a scroll, squints at it. He can't read, and declares the air inside your lungs must be purified. You sigh. You know what this means? Bleeding. He ties a leather strip around your arm, mumbles something in Latin that might have been sorry, and pulls out a knife. A small one. Rusty, but enthusiastic. With a quick slice, he assures you that the evil humors are escaping. You feel lightheaded, possibly from blood loss, but maybe from the bad vapors finally leaving your nose. Medieval medicine often leaned into this logic. If your body was doing something uncomfortable like sneezing, it meant something bad was inside. The cure. Get it out. Somehow. If not through bleeding, then maybe through sweat, or vomiting, or sticking your head over a pot of boiling cabbage until your eyebrows curled. Anything to stop the air inside you from getting more dangerous than the air outside. A popular fringe theory at the time claimed that the air itself could see your sins and sneak into your body through your open mouth or nostrils. That's why some people wore nose plugs made of wool soaked in vinegar. Not because they worked, just because they gave you a sense of control in a world where plagues were invisible and doctors still believed your spleen controlled your emotions. And let's not forget the pigeons. Yes, pigeons. A 13th century physician once suggested placing a live pigeon on the patient's chest to draw out the corrupted air. Another thought, rubbing a chicken's backside on your face could clear your nasal passages of death. Did it work? Absolutely not. But it gave people something to do. And in times of panic, doing something feels better than doing nothing. You head home from the bathhouse, wrapped in damp linen, weak from bleeding and still sneezing. The sun is setting. Someone offers you a sprig of marjoram to sniff away the devil. You take it. Why not? Back in your cottage, you hang herbs above the door, light a wax candle, blessed by a monk named Barry, and whisper a prayer you barely remember. Your dog looks at you like he knows you're doomed, or maybe he's just hoping you'll drop food. That night, you dream of air made of smoke and whispers, of doctors in beaked masks chasing you with jars of leeches. You wake up with another sneeze and a nose full of thyme, but you're still breathing, for now. It's morning again, and your nose has declared war. The sneeze hits before your eyes, even open. A sharp, involuntary explosion that echoes through your tiny cottage like a trumpet blast. You sit up groggy, and for a brief second, you swear you see your soul float up toward the ceiling like a wisp of fog. Or maybe it was just a spider. Either way, you cross yourself. Because in your world, sneezing isn't just a body doing body things. It's a spiritual event. In medieval Europe, the line between medicine and religion was thinner than the broth you had for dinner. When someone sneezed, people didn't rush to offer tissues or allergy meds. They whispered prayers. They made the sign of the cross. And sometimes they flat out panicked. You shuffle to your door, rubbing your temples, and glance across the muddy path to your neighbor. She's already outside muttering a pater noster while sprinkling water from a chipped pewter cup around her doorstep. Holy water, she says, keeps the sickness out or the devil in. She's not entirely sure. You remember something the priest said last Sunday during his unusually long sermon on sin and flatulence? He mentioned that sneezing was the body's attempt to expel evil, like a mini exorcism that came with snot. That's why people said God bless you, not because it was polite, because it was necessary. The idea was to catch your soul midair and force it back into your body before something uninvited slipped in. According to some texts of the era, when a person sneezed, their heart momentarily stopped allowing a fraction of their soul to slip loose. Blessing them was like slamming the door shut before a wandering demon could waltz in and set up shop. Historians still argue whether this belief stemmed more from early Christian doctrine or from older Roman superstitions about the breath of life. What we do know is that in some regions, sneezing without being blessed was considered spiritually dangerous, like walking barefoot through a graveyard during an eclipse. You could invite things. And it wasn't just regular people that bought into this. Popes, kings, and bishops all had very firm opinions about sneezing. There are accounts of church services being interrupted when a congregant sneezed. The priest would pause mid-sermon to deliver an urgent Dominus vobiscum before continuing. Better safe than spiritually compromised. One local bishop even issued a letter encouraging all clergy to immediately bless any who sneeze, lest misfortune enter. That bishop later died of a chest cold, but not before setting a town-wide precedent. In your village, if someone sneezes and nobody says, "Bless you," people notice. You make your way to the town square. The cobblestones are wet from last night's rain, and the sky hangs low, thick with gray. You spot your friend Merrick, who everyone calls Merrick the mucus behind his back, because he sneezes all the time. He waves at you, and then immediately sneezes. Once, twice, a third time. A boy standing nearby screams and runs off. A woman spits on the ground and draws a circle in the air with her finger. Merrick sighs. This is his life now. You remember the last time Merrick had a sneezing fit in church. The priest had halted. The service declared the pew contaminated and made him sit by the open window for the rest of Mass. One person even asked if they should burn the hymnal he touched. You lean in, whispering, "Did you eat something strange?" He shrugs. "Probably the goat stew." Or, "I'm cursed." You nod. Reasonable. It's not just the sneezing, it's what comes after. If someone sneezes and then falls ill, the entire town draws a line of cause and effect. No one bothers with incubation periods or the idea of coincidence. It's simple: sneeze equals omen. Get sick equals proof. And if the church backs it, you can bet the people will too. In fact, some early church fathers believed that sneezing might even be punishment. A tiny spiritual slap on the nose for thinking naughty thoughts or skipping confession. There's a story, possibly apocryphal, but deliciously dramatic, about a nun who sneezed during prayer and then lost her voice for a month. Divine retribution, they said. You return to your shop and light a candle beside the little wooden carving of St. Anthony, the patron of lost things and unofficially mysterious bodily functions. You say a quiet prayer, mostly out of habit, but also because you sneezed 3 times before breakfast, and that's never a good sign. Later that afternoon, a traveling friar arrives in the village. He's covered in dust, smells like cloves, and has a bag full of relics, small bone fragments, and teeth, each lovingly labeled and priced for spiritual protection. One of the bones he claims once belonged to Saint Celsus, who could sneeze thunder and never got sick. You buy a splinter wrapped in linen and tuck it into your tunic, just in case. That night you wake with a jolt, a sneeze, loud, yours. No one is awake to bless you. You stare at the ceiling, heart pounding, waiting for the sound of demonic hoofprints or a shadow crawling up the wall. Nothing happens. You breathe, and then very faintly you hear a neighbor whisper from across the lane, "Bless you." You smile. Maybe you'll live to sneeze another day. The next day begins with bells. Not the nice kind, no. These are slow, somber tolls. You know the rhythm by heart. Someone's died again. And as you tie your boots and push open your creaky wooden door, you hear the whispers already dancing on the morning breeze. He'd been sneezing just yesterday. Here we go again. The thing is, you've heard this same line about 12 times in the past 2 weeks, and it's not wrong. Everyone who's been carted off to the edge of town, lately wrapped in cloth and followed by family too scared to cry, started with a sneeze, a single innocent, probably dust-related sneeze. But in 1348, context is everything, because you're living in plague time now. The Black Death has arrived, and nobody's sneezing politely anymore. When plague season hits, every cough, sniffle, and achoo becomes a public crisis. You see it in people's eyes, fear, suspicion, and that subtle step back when someone even looks like they might sniffle. Merchants cover their faces with scarves. Churchgoers carry strong-smelling herbs in little pouches around their necks. And your cousin won't even come to Sunday supper because you once sneezed near his bread 3 months ago. The moment someone sneezes, it's like setting off an emotional firework. Shop doors quietly close. Street traffic detours. People bless themselves 3 times, mutter prayers, and pretend to suddenly remember chores elsewhere. Sneezing in this context becomes the starter pistol of the Black Death. That single sharp exhale means you might have just become contagious, or worse, doomed. You pass by the baker's stall where a woman is weeping into a bundle of cloth. Her son gone overnight. He just started sneezing, she says, over and over again, as though the act itself was the curse. In some towns, physicians began using sneezing as an early diagnostic tool, as flawed as that was. If you sneezed and had chills, into quarantine. If you sneezed twice and looked tired, off to the chapel for final rites. There was no room for nuance. Everyone was working off fear, not facts. Historians still argue whether sneezing was genuinely a symptom of the initial stages of plague or just a scapegoat for generalized respiratory horror. But in the chaos of mass death, people needed patterns, and sneezes were loud, sudden, and easy to notice. Some even claimed that the devil rode in on the breath of a sneeze, hopping from host to host like a demonic flea. So naturally, your town's priest doubles down. Every time someone sneezes, he rings a small bell and chants Avertus Pestum, while throwing handfuls of salt on the ground. Not for flavor, just defense. You go to the market, and it's turned into a circus of preventative chaos. Sellers are hawking plague powders made from dried tulip petals, iron shavings, and burnt goat horn. A man with no teeth and 3 eyebrows swears he can stop sneezes by slapping you lightly with a fish. You pass. Instead, you find yourself drawn to a group of townsfolk burning herbs in a clay pot. Mugwort, they say, keeps the plague at bay. One woman fans the smoke directly into her child's face. Another presses her nose to the rim and inhales until she coughs. You do the same. It smells like scorched salad, but at least it's something. Of course, there are the cynics. A few villagers snort and mutter that sneezing is just sneezing, that not every tickle of the nose heralds death. But those voices grow quieter each day, especially after last week when the school teacher sneezed during class and was found slumped over by nightfall. His students now cover their faces with cloth scraps and avoid each other's gaze. And then there's the man who sneezed twice in a row while selling onions. You remember this because it caused actual panic. People screamed. A horse ran into a wall. Someone threw a shoe. By evening, the poor man had been locked in his own root cellar by his family, who refused to open the door until the symptoms pass. He didn't even have symptoms. He just had bad timing and some spicy pepper near his nose. But this is what fear does. It redefines every normal function of your body into something horrifying. There's even a new rule in the village square. Sneeze once people flinch. Sneeze twice and someone starts a prayer circle. Sneeze a third time. You'd better start writing your will. You return to your shop, head buzzing from the noise, and finally sit in silence. Then, of course, the tickle returns. Just at the edge of your sinuses, you try to breathe slowly, in through the mouth, out through the nose. Maybe it's dust. Maybe it's nothing, but it's something. Achoo. Loud. Too loud. It echoes through the alley like thunder. You freeze. A dog barks. A child shrieks. You hear a door slam 3 houses down. Then, silence. You stand still for 10 seconds, 20, then a voice calls out shakily, "God bless you," and another from somewhere high above, "Don't come to church this week." You sigh. You wipe your nose with the corner of your sleeve, and you wonder if tonight the bells will toll for you. You don't go to church that week, not because you're bedridden, not yet. Just cautious. Cautious in the medieval way, which means lighting a candle for every joint in your body and chewing on dried rosemary like it's penance. But after 3 sneezes in 2 days, people start looking at you differently. Not with sympathy, with strategy. Because you know how it goes now. If you're the next to fall, no one wants to be standing near you when you do. Especially not the barber surgeon who, despite wielding sharp tools and questionable ointments, refuses to touch anyone who so much as sniffs without 2 witnesses and a signed parchment absolving him of blame. You've been advised to seek medical care, which sounds nice until you remember what that means your town's resident doctor, Master Bertram, whose entire education is a tattered book, a mortar and pestle, and a ferret named Custard. You go anyway, because, honestly, what else is there? Bertram greets you with a wide grin and several questionable stains on his tunic. He leans in, squints at your nostrils like they're windows to your soul, and says the words that strike dread in any medieval heart. You need a tonic. He disappears into the back room while Custard stares at you, unblinking. You try not to sneeze again. The last person who did ended up with leeches on their forehead and a poultice of mashed frogs. Bertram returns, holding a steaming wooden cup. The contents smell like swamp and regret. You take a tentative sip and immediately question your life choices. What's in it, you manage to ask between gags. He beams. Crushed worms and honey for sweetness. You stare at the cup. Very fresh worms, he adds, as if that helps. In medieval medicine, sneezing was often seen as a sign that the body was trying to expel evil humors, the mysterious fluids said to control your health and temperament. Your goal, then, was to restore balance, and Bertram is an artist of imbalance. He recommends a diet of boiled cabbage, pickled onions, and warm beer. No meat. Meat, he says, thickens the phlegm. Phlegm, of course, is your body's personal bog monster. If it overflows you, sneeze. And if you sneeze, well, you know how the story ends. Bertram also offers a compress for your head made of sheep's wool, soaked in vinegar and moon water. You don't ask what moon water is. You really don't want to know. Historians still debate whether these remedies were sincere attempts at healing or just very elaborate ways to keep patients occupied until they either recovered or died. What's clear is that the tonics, poultices, and herbal treatments varied wildly. Some towns swore by dried toad powder, others boiled sage in goat milk. One infamous village in Brittany had a tradition of tying leeks to the ankles. You consider all this as Bertram wraps a slice of raw turnip in linen and ties it to your forehead for balance. Custard watches approvingly. Later, you lie in bed with your worm jam and vegetable hat reflecting on your day. It's worth noting that these treatments weren't always administered in isolation. A good medieval doctor might also chant a prayer, burn an herb, and bleed you all in one visit. The line between medicine and mysticism was blurry at best. Your body wasn't just sick, it was spiritually unhinged, and the goal was to nudge it back toward the middle using whatever you had lying around, beetle's brine or the bishop's best guess. There's a moment that night, as you're trying not to breathe too deeply, when you think maybe this is all just madness. Maybe sneezing is just sneezing. Maybe you're not dying. Then you remember your cousin Edric. He had sneezed twice. Now he's buried under a cairn of stones and a sprig of thyme. You sleep poorly. You dream of Bertram ladling worm jam into a golden chalice, cackling as Custard dances on a scroll that reads, "Phlegm is your enemy." You wake up sweaty and confused. The next morning, your sneezing has stopped. You feel not worse. It's a dangerous feeling. Hope. You go outside. The air is sharp and clean, the kind that makes your nose tingle. You fight it. You will not sneeze again. You will not give them a reason to call for the cart. At the market, you pass the apothecary's stall, where a new remedy is being sold, dried fish scales mashed into a powder and mixed with elderflower syrup. Stop sneezing in one day, the sign says in crooked script. You wonder if it's just salt and lies. But you buy some anyway, because you've tasted the worm jam, and once is enough. You're standing in the square again, clutching your fish scale syrup and wondering what the stars think of your sneezing, because in this chapter of medieval madness, your runny nose might not be your fault at all. It could be Jupiter's. Welcome to the celestial medical theories of the Middle Ages, where everything from coughing to boils to how frequently you trip over your own goat could be blamed on planetary mischief. If your nose was twitching and your eyes watering, you didn't necessarily need a doctor. You needed an astrologer. So, naturally, your town has one. His name is Brother Ninian, and he's equal parts monk mapmaker and celestial interpreter. He lives in a tower just outside the village, which smells like candle wax ink and roasted parsnips. Every surface is covered with charts, globes, and long scrolls of parchment featuring moons with facial expressions and suns wearing crowns. You climb up the spiral steps one creak at a time, because the townsfolk insist your symptoms match a rising of wind in the head under Mars's gaze. You're hoping he'll say it's just a summer chill. He does not. Brother Ninian greets you with wide eyes and a soot-smudged nose. He offers you a seat, a cup of chamomile steeped in mystery, and a lecture. Your sneeze, he says gravely, was not born of earth. It was born of the sky. You nod respectfully. He opens a scroll marked with golden stars and points to a strange symbol that looks like a goose wearing a helmet. Jupiter, he says, is in Capricorn. That means moistness of the head. Moistness leads to imbalance. Imbalance leads to exhalation. Exhalation leads to spiritual unrest. So, it's Jupiter's fault, entirely, he confirms. You sip your tea. In the medieval worldview, astrology and medicine were interwoven like vines in a monastery garden. Every body part was governed by a zodiac sign. The nose and upper sinuses ruled by Aries. Your head in general, Aries again. Coincidence? Not in the 1300s. When you sneezed, it might have been because the moon was waning while Saturn passed too close to Mercury. Or maybe Venus was annoyed and decided to increase watery humors in the brain. Historians still debate how seriously the average person took this celestial charting. But in elite medical circles, like at the University of Bologna or Salerno, no diagnosis was complete without consulting the stars. Some physicians even refused to treat patients if the current planetary alignment wasn't favorable. Brother Ninian flips open another chart. This one's more colorful, with pictures of men sneezing under clouds. Tonight, he says, the moon wanes while Mars rises. Avoid dairy. And don't sleep on your left side. You write that down. You'll try. He hands you a small talisman, a disc of tin with tiny symbols scratched into it. This, he whispers, was blessed during the equinox. It will protect your nostrils. You thank him. It's either that or more worm jam, and frankly, tin seems safer. You leave his tower feeling oddly reassured. Sure, the stars might be messing with your head, but at least someone has a reason for your sneezing, even if that reason involves the constellation Leo and a goat-shaped comet that only appears once a century. Back in town, people are preparing for the weekly astrological cleansing. It's a ritual where everyone burns sage clove and crushed oyster shells at sunset, hoping to appease the heavens. You join in this time, holding your tin talisman and muttering something about Aries and mucus. An older woman nudges you and says Mars gave my husband gout. You nod solemnly. Makes perfect sense. Later that night, as you lie in bed with a tin disc tied around your neck and a burning clove on your windowsill, you feel a sneeze creeping back into your body. You panic. You sit up. You glance at the sky. Not now, Jupiter, you whisper. Give me one night. And surprisingly, the sneeze fades. You fall asleep to the sound of distant sheep and the soft rustling of your astrology chart pinned to the wall like a ward against the unknown. Because maybe it's not just phlegm. Maybe it's not even the plague. Maybe it's the planets. You wake up without sneezing, which feels like winning the medieval lottery if the prize was not being shunned by your entire village before breakfast. Your tin talisman lies cool on your chest, and the clove from last night has burned down to a fragrant little husk. No cough, no tickle, no catastrophe. But peace, of course, is temporary. By mid-morning, while sweeping dust from your workshop, because nothing sells shoes like cleanliness in a town where people wear one pair for life, you feel it. That unmistakable creeping sensation, a warmth behind your nose, the tightening of your sinuses, a single involuntary blink. You freeze. The dust swirls at your feet. You try everything. Pinching your nose, pressing your tongue to the roof of your mouth, even whispering, no, like a desperate plea to the universe. It's no use. Achoo! A burst so loud the chickens in the alley scatter. A dog howls in the distance. You think you hear a window shutter slam. Great. That's sneeze number 4 this week, and everyone knows 4 is the number of misfortune. Or maybe it's 3. Depends on who you ask, and how recently they buried a cousin. You step outside hoping to avoid gossip, but it's already too late. Your neighbor, the Cooper, with ears like bat wings, is staring at you from behind his barrel. You, again, he says, not unkindly, but not comfortingly either. At this point, you've tried astrology, garlic bundles, worm jam blessed tin discs, and sleeping with your head angled toward Mercury. None of it seems to be working. So Today you try something new. You visit Lady Elfrida. She's the midwife's sister, which automatically gives her mystical status, and also the proud owner of the village's largest collection of wooden spoons and cats. People say she once stopped a man from sneezing for an entire month. Others say she accidentally turned someone into a baker. The stories vary. Her cottage smells like damp rosemary candle smoke and possibly regret. You knock. She doesn't answer. You knock again. A chicken pecks your shoe. Finally, the door creaks open, and there she is, hair like a tangled nest, eyes sharp as fish hooks, and a scarf so large it could double as a sail. She peers at you. You held it in, she says flatly. You blink. Held what in the sneeze? You nod sheepishly. She sighs, as though you've just confessed to hiding a demon under your bed. She motions you inside without another word. The interior is chaotic jars of herbs, bundles of dried roots, and a cat sleeping in what you hope is not a medical basin. Lady Elfrida circles you, once hums, then pokes you directly in the forehead. Too much pressure, she mutters, letting the devil stew inside. You don't know whether she means metaphorically or medically. She tells you to sit. You do. Then she begins pulling things from a basket: wool, garlic, some kind of dried mushroom, and what might be a small preserved lizard. She stuffs them into a linen pouch and ties it shut with red thread. Sleep with this under your tongue, she instructs. You hesitate. I didn't say swallow it, she adds, rolling her eyes. The medieval belief around sneezing was this. It was your body's attempt to expel something, not just illness, but sin, curses, bad spirits, corrupted humors, or wandering bits of malevolent air. Stopping a sneeze mid-course, that was dangerous. That meant keeping the bad stuff inside. Some texts warned that suppressing a sneeze could cause the head to rupture. Yes, literally rupture from built-up vapors. One Parisian manuscript describes a man who tried to silence the sacred release, only to be found babbling nonsense under a tree, convinced he was a goose. Whether true or not, the fear stuck. Historians still argue whether this fear came from misunderstanding basic anatomy or pure spiritual anxiety. Likely both. Lady Elfrida believes it without question. She gives you further instructions. Rub sheep fat behind your ears. At dusk avoid cold stones, and for the love of Saint Gervasius, never sneeze while barefoot. She also recommends sleeping with your head facing east to let the sneeze exit fully and follow the wind. You nod solemnly. She hands you a piece of cheese for clarity. You eat it, because at this point, refusing strange cheese feels like tempting fate. As you leave, she adds one last thing. If you feel a sneeze coming, don't hold. Let it go. Let the body speak. You walk home feeling oddly empowered, not cured, but at least coached. That night you prepare your bed with a careful layering of charms, sachets, and one warm rock for your feet. You place the pouch gently under your tongue, briefly, then move it under your pillow where it belongs. You lie down, staring at the wooden beams above. And wouldn't you know it? The tickle starts again. You could fight it. You want to. But then you remember Elfrida's words. The pressure, the risks, the geese. So you sit up, take a deep breath, and let it rip. Choo! The cottage rattles. A candle flickers, but your head stays intact. The cat merely blinks. For the first time in days, you fall asleep peacefully. Your head doesn't pound. Your chest doesn't feel like it's hiding a demon. Just calm, gentle breathing and the faint scent of burnt thyme in the air. Maybe the answer wasn't in the planets, or the worm paste, or the goat bone powders. Maybe it was this simple, all along, never hold it in. The next morning, the village is oddly quiet. You step outside and listen. No bells, no wailing, not even a single "God bless you" echoing from down the lane. It's unsettling, but you take it as a good omen. Maybe everyone's just asleep. Or maybe no one's sneezed yet. You stretch. You breathe deeply. And then you sneeze. Achoo. Spectacular, unapologetic, glorious. You wait. Nothing happens. No shutters slamming. No chickens scattering. No children screaming demon and sprinting into hedges. Maybe the village has grown used to it. Or maybe they're just out of energy. You head to the market and notice a stall selling little slips of parchment. On them, written in crooked charcoal letters, is the same phrase, "God bless you." A man with a thin mustache and a shifty smile is selling them for 2 copper pennies each. Guaranteed soul-catching blessings, he shouts. Pre-written, pre-blessed, pre-folded. You ask, who's blessing them? He points vaguely toward the chapel. You don't ask further. In a world where a sneeze could mean death, or worse, social isolation, the concept of blessing someone immediately became more than just custom. It was an act of communal protection. If someone sneezed, it was your duty to say the words quickly before the soul drifted off or evil slithered in. This wasn't just polite, it was doctrinal. You pass an older couple sitting on a bench. The woman sneezes softly, barely audible. Without hesitation, her husband responds, "God bless you. May your soul remain bound. May no ill wind pass your lips." You smile. That's the deluxe version. In some towns, if you didn't bless someone, it was seen as suspicious, even hostile. Like maybe you wanted them to suffer. Or worse, maybe you'd placed a curse and were now waiting to see if it worked. There are recorded cases, actual ones, of villagers accusing others of sorcery simply for remaining silent after a sneeze. Historians still argue whether this reflexive blessing was more spiritual superstitious or just social pressure. The church certainly leaned into it. In some parishes, not saying "God bless you" earned a scolding or a penance. In others, It was part of official instruction. You remember once hearing a sermon where Father Odrick, eyes ablaze, declared that failing to bless someone invited the breath of hell into your community. He followed this up with a week-long fast and a spontaneous bonfire of dried herbs that nearly set the chapel roof on fire. Now, of course, you always bless. In fact, some people have turned it into an art form. You overhear a boy offering blessings in 3 languages. Another carries a little bell he rings after each sneeze. One woman insists on singing hers. It's become competitive. You find yourself at the apothecary stall again. He's still selling that fish scale syrup, but now he's added something new. Blessing beads. Tiny wooden tokens you're supposed to press into someone's hand the moment they sneeze. Transferring divine protection through contact. A neat idea if you don't mind touching sweaty palms during flu season. Next to him, a young girl is selling lavender sprigs bundled with scraps of parchment. Each scrap reads, "Breathe freely, fear not." You buy one, not for the science, just for the smell. And then it happens again. Someone sneezes, loud, unrestrained, from the far side of the market. Instantly, 10 people shout, "God bless you." A few raise their hands. One person drops to their knees. You blink. It's like a religious flash mob. And weirdly, it works. The sneezer laughs, bows dramatically, and carries on buying turnips. Later in the chapel, you find Father Odrick humming to himself while polishing a silver cross. He sees you and smiles. "I hear you've been sneezing again," he says. You nod loudly. Good. Better out than in. The soul must be startled back into place sometimes. You glance at the pews. They're empty. A few "God bless you" parchments are tucked into the hymnals. "Father," you ask, "do you really think we can lose our souls when we sneeze?" He pauses. I think he says slowly, "It's not about the sneeze. It's about the fear of being alone when you do. That moment of vulnerability. The blessing is just a tether." You leave the chapel thoughtful. Maybe the words matter less than the moment. Maybe saying "bless you" is just how the medieval world learned to say "I see you." You're still here. You're still one of us. That night before bed, you sneeze again. No one's around to hear it. But you whisper to yourself, "Bless me," just in case. It begins with a drop of blood, not from your mouth or your arm or any of the usual medieval leak points, but from your nose. Just a small trickle. You notice it while chopping cabbage. One moment you're grumbling about the quality of winter vegetables, the next, there's a red splotch on your tunic. You freeze. Then you sneeze. Achoo! Now it's 2 drops. Your hands tremble slightly. You glance around your empty cottage, half expecting a disembodied voice to whisper, "It is time." But the only sound's the faint scratching of a mouse behind the wall and the dull thunk of your knife against the wooden board. It might be nothing, except in medieval Europe, nothing doesn't cause your nose to bleed and your face to flush and your brain to scream omen. You sit down, press a cloth to your nose, and wonder, is this divine punishment a result of your poor planetary alignment, or perhaps your sins? Those 4 stolen plums, the impolite thoughts about the butcher's wife, are catching up to you. You know the stories. When the nose bleeds after a sneeze, it's a message. That message varies depending on whom you ask. According to old texts, it could mean a violent shift in the body's humors, too much heat in the brain, too much pressure from bile. Or, more dramatically, the angry gaze of heaven. There was a popular theory that God sent nosebleeds as warnings, not full punishments. Those were boils, blindness, or your house burning down, but a nudge, a holy eyebrow raise. In some monastic circles, nosebleeds were considered a sign of internal spiritual decay, a slow leak of purity. Priests recommended fasting prayer and moderate self-flagellation with birch twigs. Some also encouraged long confession, even if you couldn't remember what you were guilty of. You visit the chapel. Again, Father Odric frowns at the sight of you. That's your blood, he says. You nod. He nods back slowly, then hands you a damp towel and a Bible. I suggest 3 Psalms and no dairy. You begin reading aloud from the Book of Psalms, nose tilted upward, cloth in place. You get to verse 14 before sneezing again. The priest startles so violently, he drops his candle. It goes out. 4 sneezes in a week, and now bleeding, he murmurs. Perhaps you should speak to the relic. Ah, yes, the relic. Your village, like many, possesses one, a finger bone from Saint Ethelgrim the Moist. He was a monk said to have healed hundreds from nasal afflictions in the 11th century simply by sneezing near them. A real miracle man. Or a man with bad allergies, it's unclear. The relic is housed in a silver box enshrined behind the altar. You're allowed to approach it if you bring an offering. You leave a turnip. Kneeling, you whisper, "Please protect my nose." No answer, but the bleeding stops. Coincidence? Maybe. You won't risk doubting it. Later that day, you hear that 3 others in the village have also had nosebleeds. The blacksmith, a baker's son, and your neighbor, who always wears that suspiciously wide-brimmed hat. The news spreads fast. People start sniffing each other more than usual. Anyone with a red-stained handkerchief becomes a public hazard. Soon enough, new methods of diagnosis emerge. A woman declares that if your blood drops hit the ground in a straight line, you're safe. If they splatter, you're cursed. Another insists that a nosebleed from the left nostril means bad fortune, but the right one means divine clarity. Historians still argue over whether any of these interpretations were ever formalized. Some believe they were just local folklore. Others think even doctors got involved trying to map the texture of blood to personality traits like some sort of biological palm reading. You try everything to avoid another bleed. Cold compresses made of river stones, sleeping upright in a chair, wearing a scarf infused with goose fat. You even hang upside down briefly just to see if the blood might return to your brain. All this, and still the sneezes come. At one point, you consider letting Bertram, the barber surgeon, release the pressure via a careful cut behind your ear. You decline. He's sharpening his blade on a brick when you leave. At night, you dream of red rivers and saints with tissues. The next morning, the blood is gone. You sneeze. Nothing follows. You wait. Still nothing. You breathe out, grateful. Maybe your nose has made peace with the heavens. Still, just to be safe, you offer another turnip, just in case St. Ethelgrim is hungry. You know what's worse than sneezing during a sermon and having absolutely no remedy ready at hand, no blessed cloth, no sacred tin disc, not even a sad little sprig of rosemary to wave around like a scented apology. That's why today you take a walk to the one place in the village where everyone goes when the world feels like it's ending the peasant's pharmacy. It's not a shop. It's a wooden table under an awning near the well, guarded by a woman named Maud, who's 90 if she's a day with teeth like fence posts and the herbal knowledge of a forest goddess. Some people say she talks to plants. Others say she is a plant. Either way, no one argues with her. You approach the table cautiously. It's loaded with little cloth bundles, chipped jars, leather pouches, and odd lumps of what may or may not be food. Maud doesn't smile. She doesn't need to. Her presence alone makes people straighten their backs and speak clearly. "What ails you?" she asks, already sniffing the air near you. You sneeze gently. She nods, as if you've just confessed to theft. "Right. You'll be needing the mix." You don't ask what the mix is. She pulls out a pouch and begins combining ingredients with the efficiency of someone who has definitely done this mid-childbirth. Dried onions, goat hair, a pinch of crushed acorns, ground bone, ashes possibly from a saint's fire, possibly just her stove, a splash of vinegar. Then she wraps it all in old linen and hands it to you. "Hang it over your door," she says, "and under your chin." At the same time, you nod slowly. "Will it stop the sneezing?" She shrugs. "It'll give the demons something to chew on instead." Makes sense. You carry the mix home, the scent of onions and burnt socks trailing behind you like a cloud of doubt. People part for you in the street, not because they respect you, but because they don't want to know what's in that bag. Back in your cottage, you hang it as instructed. The smell is heroic. Your dog refuses to come inside. A beetle scurries away in what looks like a panic. Still, you sneeze less. Not zero, but less. And that's something. These homemade remedies are everywhere. Every peasant family has their own version of the mix. One neighbor swears by stuffing rose petals in his ears. Another drinks beet juice before bed to calm the lungs. One woman even tapes garlic to her elbows, which doesn't stop sneezing, but certainly clears out the room. Historians still argue over whether these remedies had any real medical impact. Some say they offered psychosomatic relief. If you believe something's helping, it just might. Others argue that a few ingredients like vinegar and thyme did contain mild antiseptic properties. But for most villagers, the goal wasn't science. It was doing something, taking action against an invisible threat, engaging in a ritual that made you feel a little less helpless. You make your own version eventually. Crushed mint, dried apple skin, goat ash, clean, and a scrap of old sermon parchment. You name it. Shoemaker's soother. It doesn't stop sneezing, but it smells marginally better than Maud's version. And no beetles flee from your windowsill anymore, which you count as progress. Eventually, the town holds a kind of sneeze market where people trade home remedies like playing cards. You swap one of your soothers for a garlic radish paste someone claims stopped a man from sneezing for 2 entire months. The man, of course, lives in another village. You'll never meet him. Still, you try the paste. It burns. A lot. You sneeze anyway. At least now it smells like effort. That evening, as you sit by the fire nursing your slightly scorched nose, you feel a sneeze rise again. You close your eyes and let it out. Coo, it rattles the rafters. But this time you don't panic. You don't rush for garlic or blessed socks. You simply pat your little bundle of herbs and whisper, "You tried." Maybe that's what the mix is really for. Not to cure, but to comfort. To say we're fighting this in our own weird way. You fall asleep with a pouch of goat hair and onions swinging gently above your bed like a holy air freshener. And for now, that's enough. The next morning, a messenger from the nearby city arrives. He's dusty, grim-faced, and holding a scroll that's been folded too many times. He announces, rather dramatically, that the medical university in the city of Avondale has released a new pamphlet on the humors of the head and the movements of air. You don't understand half those words, but people gather anyway, because if there's one thing villagers love more than remedies, it's pretending they understand Latin. You shuffle in with the others as the scribe reads aloud. It's filled with complicated sentences, confident opinions, and enough footnotes to tile a chapel. The general message, sneezing, is a violent convulsion of the cerebral airways triggered by imbalance of the phlegmatic humor and external wind. You blink. Your neighbor whispers, "I think that means dust." It gets better. According to the pamphlet, if you sneeze 3 times in a row and your left eye waters, it means your brain is hot. If your right eye waters, it means your liver is angry. If neither, then your spleen is in turmoil. You still don't know what your spleen does. You suspect neither do the writers. The medical universities, especially those in Paris, Bologna, and Salerno, are seen as the pinnacle of knowledge, but their teachings often trickle down to the countryside like river water through dirty cheesecloth, slightly distorted, somewhat questionable, but still received as gospel. Your town's physician, Master Bertram, of worm jam fame, is absolutely delighted. He reads the pamphlet 6 times in one day and begins referring to sneezes as cerebral expulsions. He also starts charging extra for head inspections. He taps your skull with a stick, listens thoughtfully, and mutters, "The brain winds are restless." You nod like this means something. Then he pulls out his newest cure, a thick gray paste made from boiled sage. Pigeon feathers and soot apply to the temples. At dawn, you ask why. He smiles, teeth blackened by mulberry juice. Because it's in the pamphlet. This is the danger of medieval academia. It sounds convincing, looks official, and smells faintly of authority. But much of it is just wrong. Historians still argue whether these university-trained doctors improved or worsened local medicine. Some introduced hygiene anatomy and surgical principles. Others bled people into unconsciousness and blamed earaches on bad dreams. One thing's for certain, they love talking about humors. Ah, the four humors, the medieval body's internal weather system. Blood, hot and wet. Phlegm, cold and wet yellow. Bile, hot and dry. And black bile, cold and dry. If you sneezed too much, you probably had too much phlegm. If you didn't sneeze at all, maybe your bile was blocking the airways. Or perhaps your personality was too melancholic, causing your fluids to retreat. It's medical poetry, really. Terrible, ineffective poetry. Soon people in your village begin diagnosing each other using these terms. Oh, she's sneezing because she's too cold inside. He's got melancholy lungs. Your daughter doesn't sneeze classic excess bile. You wonder if this is progress or just fancier superstition. Still, there's something comforting about the confidence of it all. These scholars, most of whom haven't sneezed outside a library in a decade, speak with such authority. You start to believe them until a new page arrives, an updated appendix. It declares that sneezing once while facing north is a sign of strong lungs, twice while facing west, a sign of demonic tension. You drop the parchment. Demonic tension. You spend that night facing southeast, just in case. You also ask your dog to sneeze, but he just stares at you. The next day, Master Bertram organizes a community demonstration. He asks volunteers to sneeze into different buckets labeled with the four humors. This is supposedly for science. It quickly devolves into chaos. Someone sneezes into the yellow bile bucket and faints. Another sneezes across all four. A woman demands a fifth bucket for spiritual fluid. Bertram starts crying from the smoke of the burning rosemary. Someone accuses the buckets of being cursed. You quietly walk home. You've had enough academia for one day. That night you sit by the fire, reading over the pamphlet again. There's a drawing, anatomical, vaguely obscene, of a man with arrows pointing from his nose to various stars. You close the page and sneeze just once. No buckets, no tinctures, no Latin diagnosis. Just your body doing what bodies do. You whisper to the empty room, "I think my phlegm is fine." Then you sleep soundly for the first time in weeks. You wake up thinking about Aristotle, which is frankly a strange way to start a morning when your nose still tingles Your pantry is half garlic and someone tied a goat skull to your fence overnight for protection. But ever since the pamphlets from the university arrived, the village can't stop invoking the ancient names. Aristotle said phlegm breeds in sleep. Aristotle believed the brain is the coldest organ. Aristotle would have never sneezed during Mass. You're not sure any of this is true, but that doesn't stop people from quoting him like a celebrity herbalist. What you do know is that his writings have been passed down, translated, retranslated, copied by candlelight, miscopied by sleepy monks, and interpreted by people who think Jupiter controls the left nostril. Still, somehow, his words carry weight. So, when your friend Merrick lends you a scroll Aristotle on breath and spirit, translated by someone named Brother Wilfred, who spells nose 5 different ways you read it, it's confusing. Apparently, Aristotle thought that sneezing was a kind of sacred exhalation, a bodily impulse tied to the heat of the heart and the vital breath. He wasn't a fan of nose blowing, which he said might disturb the balance of inward winds. At least, that's how Brother Wilfred puts it. You wonder how much of this Aristotle actually wrote and how much Wilfred invented between gulps of monastery wine. Still, the scroll insists that sneezing serves a noble purpose. It purges the brain of excess moisture. It resets your inner balance. It even, according to one baffling passage, may prevent lunacy if timed at moonrise. Your favorite part is the footnote, which simply reads, "Do not attempt this while riding a horse." You sit back, scroll on your lap, and sigh. How did this happen? How did a Greek philosopher from 2,000 years ago end up dictating the way you think about your nasal passages? Historians still argue whether Aristotle's influence on medieval medicine was accurate or wildly misunderstood. Some suggest that scholars twisted his ideas to fit Christian theology. Others believe medieval translators just didn't know what to do with all his metaphors about inner fire and moist air. But that didn't stop anyone from treating them as gospel. Soon your town physician Bertram, of course, begins offering a new Aristotelian purge. It involves deep inhalations of cinnamon vapor, followed by forced sneezing over hot coals. To realign the vital winds, he explains. You try it. You regret it. You don't stop sneezing for 3 hours. Your dog hides. Children throw rosemary at you for luck. Later, Bertram tells you this is proof that your humors were in deep rebellion. You nod. You can't argue. Your nose is still doing jumping jacks. In response to the scroll's popularity, a monk at the chapel begins giving public readings from great medical minds. He shouts about Hippocrates, about Galen, about how sneezing is like prayer through the body. Everyone nods sagely. Then he sneezes mid-sentence and has to bless himself 3 times just to be safe. There's something strange, almost sweet, about how these ancient voices echo into your little village, carried by parchment and memory, and the desperate hope that someone somewhere understood the body better than your town currently does. You hear that in another village, someone's cousin used a quote from Galen to justify sticking leeches up their nose. It didn't work. The leeches escaped. People screamed. A barn burned down. You wonder if Aristotle would have approved. But there's something comforting about these ancient names, too. They give people a sense of order, a belief that sneezing isn't chaos. It's part of a system, a pattern, a philosophy. You sit at your workbench that evening, repairing a shoe with one hand and holding a dried copy of the scroll in the other. You feel a sneeze building. You don't panic. You let it happen. Achoo! You glance at the candlelight flickering beside you. Well, you whisper, at least I'm not sneezing on horseback. And you smile, because maybe, just maybe, you're not cursed. Maybe you're just following Aristotle's advice. Badly, but sincerely. This time it isn't you who sneezes. It's the king, well, not in person. You hear it first as a rumor passed from a passing merchant who heard it from a stable boy who claims his cousin was in the courtyard when it happened. Apparently His Majesty let out a sneeze so thunderous it startled 3 knights and knocked over a goblet of wine. By midday, the entire village knows. By nightfall, the story has evolved. Now the king sneezed twice. A pigeon flew into a chandelier, and the royal apothecary fainted. Someone says he was immediately given a blessing by 4 bishops and a choir of monks. Someone else claims a court astrologer declared the double sneeze a sign of war. You try to stay skeptical, but deep down you're curious what happens when a royal sneezes. Because when you sneeze, people look at you like you've just kicked a church bell. But when the king sneezes, people light candles and consult maps. It's a very different process. In medieval society, the sneeze of a noble, especially a monarch, was not seen as mundane. It was an event, possibly a message from God, or a subtle warning from the body politic. The king, after all, is believed to be divinely chosen. His health reflects the health of the realm. If he sneezes, perhaps England needs more rain, or fewer taxes, or someone's about to die. You've read the stories. One king allegedly sneezed right before declaring war. Another lost his voice after a particularly violent sneeze during Lent. Yet another issued a decree that no one was to sneeze in his presence on pain of exile. He sneezed himself a week later and exiled his mirror. Historians still argue whether these stories are real or just political gossip wrapped in dramatic flair. But the symbolism is powerful. A royal sneeze isn't just a bodily function, it's a signal. In some courts, there were entire rituals around sneezing. The king would be immediately offered holy water, rose petals, and a gold-threaded cloth. If he sneezed 3 times, the court magician might be summoned, not to cure him, just to interpret it. Maybe Mars is rising. Maybe the queen is pregnant. Maybe someone forgot to salt the mutton. You imagine what it must be like. to sneeze and have a dozen people rush to your side, to have your sinuses blessed in 3 languages, to have your snot regarded as a divine expression. Meanwhile, you sneeze and someone leaves a bag of onions at your door with a note that says, "Try harder." But it gets you thinking. You're not royalty. You're not even a respected nose in town. But maybe you can learn something from how nobles treat their sneezes. So you try it. The next time you feel one coming on, you pause dramatically. You tilt your chin upward. You let the village see. Then you sneeze. Achoo! You follow it with a soft, "Let the air be clean." People blink. One man claps. A child curtsies. Huh. You try it again later, but this time with props. A small cloth freshly embroidered. A sprig of lavender. You sneeze, then dab gently and say, "I accept nature's cycle." It becomes a bit of a performance. Soon others join in. One man sneezes and bows. A woman sneezes and crosses herself and her piglet. A boy sneezes and declares himself temporarily king. No one argues. Your sneezes gain fame. You start calling them honorable expulsions. Someone asks if you're related to nobility. You say, in a nasal sense. Of course, not everyone is amused. The town clerk, who hasn't sneezed since the last harvest, says this is a mockery of serious matters. He writes a note to Father Odric, requesting less theatrical congestion. Father Odric, who once sneezed during Mass and blamed it on the devil, is in no position to judge. He blesses your sneeze with a smile and a wink. You begin designing a sneeze protocol. Stand, tall inhale, with dignity. Sneeze, gently but firmly. Follow with a quiet phrase of gratitude. "May the wind carry no ill," you say. Or sometimes, let the balance return. It catches on. The baker starts offering sneeze scones for sinus comfort. The butcher wraps meat in cloths that read, "God, guard your breath." The village even holds a small festival, Sneeze Day, where people come forward and share their most memorable nose events. It's silly, it's sincere, and it helps people smile. Because in a world where you could die from a breeze, owning your sneeze feels like rebellion. That night you lie in bed thinking of the king. Maybe he really did knock over a goblet. Maybe he didn't. But you like to imagine he smiled afterward. Maybe said something wise. Maybe someone blessed him, not because he was royal, but because he was human, just like you. You're starting to think the real culprit isn't demons or dust or even the stars. It's your personality. At least that's what Bertram is muttering these days as he leans over your face with a small glass tube and a bundle of dried mint. Excessive sneezing, he says, comes from a phlegmatic temperament. You're too moist, too slow, too inward. You blink. "I was just standing near the bread." He frowns. "The bread's fine. You, however, are emotionally soggy. It's all thanks to the latest fashion in village medicine temperament diagnosis, straight from the dusty pages of the ancient Four Humors doctrine. It's not enough anymore to have a stuffy nose. you now also have to face the possibility that your very character is to blame. You see, in this worldview, people don't just get sick. They're built sick. Your body, your moods, your habits, and yes, even your sneezes are all governed by the balance or lack thereof of blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. And you, according to Bertram, are clearly too phlegmatic. The phlegmatic type is said to be calm, quiet, thoughtful, and prone to leaking, mucus, tears, possibly even opinions you didn't mean to say out loud. You're told this is why you sneeze during funerals, why your nose runs when it rains, and why you once fell asleep during your own birthday supper. He prescribes a new routine, early rising dry bread, and frequent yelling. Stoke the inner fire, he says. Dry out the lungs. You try. You get up at dawn. You eat stale toast. You shout, "Get out!" at your boots just to see what happens. Your dog watches from the corner, deeply concerned. It doesn't help. Your sneezes continue. So, you try the next idea, a humor-balancing diet. It's based on the idea that foods contain their own temperaments: hot, cold, moist, dry. And your meals must counter your natural imbalances. For you, that means avoiding cucumbers, 2 watery melons, basically rain in a rind, and fish swims in cold sorrow. Instead, you're encouraged to eat lentils, old cheese, and anything that's been smoked over time. You also start applying a compress made of baked salt and burnt fennel to your chest to dry the chest vapors. Your skin smells like lunch. Historians still argue whether any of this had measurable physical benefits. Some suggest the act of following a regimen gave people a sense of control, which helped more than the treatments themselves. Others think it was just trial and error by candlelight, guided by scribbles and superstition. You're beginning to suspect it's the second. Then one day at the market, you meet a woman named Beatrix. She claims to have been born sanguine, cheerful, warm, prone to spontaneous song, and yet she sneezes more than anyone you've ever met. 4 times before breakfast, she brags. Once during childbirth. You're intrigued, but aren't sanguine types supposed to be immune to phlegm, you ask? She shrugs. Maybe I'm complicated. It's the first time you hear someone challenge the humors. You begin asking around. A choleric boy, supposed to be hot-headed and dry, confesses to sneezing every time he eats garlic. A melancholic woman says she's never sneezed in her life, but weeps during thunderstorms. The pattern starts to unravel. People start saying things like, maybe the humors are more like suggestions, or perhaps the stars just like mischief. You like that. Still, you continue your ritual. You keep your meals balanced according to the village chart, a hand-drawn wheel that Bertram insists was copied from Salerno, though it includes a doodle of a pig wearing boots. You sip dried pear tea. You hum at sunrise. You shout at your shoes once a week, just in case. But when the sneezes come, and they still come, you stop blaming your personality. You stop thinking you're fundamentally damp inside. You start thinking, maybe sneezing is just sneezing. Your neighbor agrees. I think I'm balanced, she says, and I still sneeze so hard I drop my baby in the cabbage. You don't ask what happened to the cabbage that night. You make peace with your phlegm. You light a candle. You sip warm ale. You sneeze once, twice, and no one yells. No one blesses. No one hands you a boiled leek. You smile. You are not a failure of temperament. You're just a human with a very expressive nose. And tomorrow, you might shout at your boots again. But tonight, you rest. By now, you're used to the sneezes. They come and go like stray cats, uninvited, disruptive, sometimes loud, but no longer terrifying. What still unnerves you, though, are the lengths people will go to in order to prevent them. Today's obsession: cloaks, hoods, stones, and scented lumps of panic. It starts with the smell. Summer's turning, and the town's air grows thick sweet with overripe fruit, sour with chamber pots, pungent with wet hay, and the unfortunate fish market. The scent alone is enough to trigger a sneeze from a stone wall, let alone your unfortunate, overly sensitive nose. So people begin improvising. Scarves soaked in vinegar, cloth masks stuffed with lavender. One man ties sage leaves into his mustache. Another fills his sleeves with crushed juniper and flaps them like wings every time he walks past the tannery. You follow suit. Bertram gives you a nosegay, a bundle of herbs bound tightly with string, rosemary, bay, thyme, and something that smells vaguely like despair. Keep it under your chin, he instructs, or tuck it into your armpit. That's where the body vents sorrow. You try both. People nod as you walk by. You're now the man with the portable garden. A young girl offers you a sprig of basil for luck. You accept. You sneeze. The basil withers. It's not just herbs. People start wearing hoods indoors, heavy wool cloaks with high collars or hats with built-in flaps. You spot one man with an entire onion tied to his belt, absorbs the plague air, he whispers. Another wears a garlic wreath like a floral crown, daring death to come close. And then come the stones. Someone somewhere read a passage suggesting that certain rocks, especially porous ones, can absorb corrupted air. Soon, every household has a sneeze stone, usually kept near the bed or hung by the door. Yours is a lumpy gray thing that looks suspiciously like a potato. Bertram insists it's air-hungry granite. You name it, Gerald. Gerald doesn't prevent sneezing, but he makes an excellent doorstop. Historians still debate the logic of these methods. Some say the herbs genuinely helped filter or mask bad smells, which people associated with illness. Others argue it was all psychological, a way of fighting fear with fabric and fragrance. Either way, it becomes fashion. The richer townsfolk take it further. You see one woman wearing gloves infused with amber oil and rose resin. Her hat smells like a lemon orchard. She carries a fan made of pressed mint leaves and shoos away peasants who sniffle too close. I don't fear death, she says, but I do abhor sneezing in public. You want to sneeze on her shoes, but you restrain yourself. Soon, the market begins selling aromatic stones in pouches, onyx, amber, even glass pebbles, blessed by a bishop. One vendor promises that if you sleep with 2 plague absorbers under your pillow, your soul will remain intact through the night. A bargain at 3 silver coins. You buy one. It smells like burned apples and melted hope. Still, you sleep better. Of course, the most famous protective gear belongs to the physicians themselves. Once a week, a traveling plague doctor passes through town. He wears the mask, a long beaked thing stuffed with mint cloves and crushed camphor. It looks like a crow was promoted to bishop. Children scream, adults bow, dogs growl. He doesn't speak, just points, sniffs, moves on. You try not to sneeze while he's nearby. He carries a staff to keep people at a distance. You imagine what it must be like to wear that much fabric in summer. You imagine sneezing inside that beak. You shudder. Still, you can't help admiring the commitment. At least he's taking action. You begin collecting your own tools. One scarf dipped in mint tea, a pouch of salt and elderflower, a piece of red cloth tied to your ankle to confuse illness, a tin disc from Brother Ninian with a tiny star carved in it. You hang them by the door, not because they work, but because they feel like armor. Later that week, a storm rolls through. The wind howls, whipping the town into nervous energy. Everyone rushes to double wrap their heads. The smell of wet wool and vinegar fills the chapel. Someone sneezes during the closing hymn. The silence is immediate. Then 10 blessings at once. One in Latin, one shouted, one whispered like a love note to the void. The sneezer bows solemn. The moment passes. That night, as you light your bedside candle, Gerald, the sneeze stone, watches from the shelf. Your herbs are arranged like a shrine. Your hood hangs neatly beside your cloak. You smile, you sneeze, and nothing happens, except maybe you feel just a little more safe. You wake to the sound of bells again. Not the death bells this time, thankfully, but the smaller chapel bell rung when someone's made a miraculous recovery. That's the rumor anyway. You overhear a boy shouting she was coughing and sneezing all week, and then bam, she kissed the relic and stopped. You don't usually believe in miracles that begin with bam, but it gets your attention because you've tried everything. The cloaks, the herbs, the scrolls, even Gerald, the potato-shaped plague stone. Yet still the sneezes linger, and now apparently divine help is trending again. So you follow the noise. At the chapel, a small crowd has gathered. Inside, Father Odrick stands beside a pedestal upon which rests a delicate glass box. Within it lies a finger bone, thin, pale, suspiciously clean, the blessed fragment of Saint Sebastian Odrick, says eyes gleaming, protector against pestilence. He who endured arrows but never once sneezed. You raise an eyebrow. You're pretty sure the saint's hagiography doesn't mention nasal immunity, but no one else questions it. According to Odrick, the relic has been known to reduce fevers, cure rashes, and in this week's marketing campaign, halt sneezing caused by cursed air and misaligned stars. You glance around. People are nodding. Some are praying. One man is holding a chicken and whispering apologies. Relics are big business in medieval life. Teeth bones, cloth fragments, anything that once touched someone saintly is believed to carry residual holiness. If it's in a pretty box and smells vaguely of incense, even better. You join the queue. When it's your turn, Audric instructs you to bow, whisper a sin, and touch the box gently with one finger. You do. You feel warm, possibly because there are 30 people in a very small chapel, breathing heavily and hoping for salvation. But still, you sneeze loudly. Everyone gasps. Audric makes the sign of the cross and dabs the box with holy water. Sometimes he says solemnly, the blessing must first expel the illness. You nod. Of course. Later that day, you visit your neighbor Agnes, who has gone fully devotional. Her cottage is now a shrine. Dried flowers hang from the rafters. Candles flicker in every corner. And in the center, on a table covered in velvet, is a splinter of wood she claims was once part of a saint's hairbrush. You just hold it while you sleep, she says. The sneezes drift away. You ask if it works. She sneezes twice while answering, but insists that's just lingering doubt, leaving the body. You thank her, and she gives you a prayer ribbon soaked in rose oil. Tie it to your left wrist, she instructs, but only on Wednesdays. You leave with your ribbon, your relic memory, and a growing sense that maybe, just maybe, people are inventing certainty because it's easier than waiting for a cure. Historians still argue whether relics ever held medicinal power or if they were just physical vessels for faith. Some think the placebo effect was powerful enough to lower fevers. Others think people just wanted something to hold on to, literally. And honestly, you understand. Because when the world feels like it might sneeze you into the next life, a little ritual can feel like a wall against the unknown. You start creating your own. Every morning you light a candle, not because it kills bacteria, though Bertram insists it might, but because it's calming. Every evening you place your shoes in a perfect line and mutter, "Stay firm beneath me." No one taught you that phrase. It just feels right. You tie the ribbon to your wrist, not just on Wednesdays, and slowly something shifts. Not your sinuses, they still misbehave, but your mind. The sneezes come and you don't panic. You bow your head, bless yourself, and move on. The villagers notice. You look better, someone says. You nod. I feel steadier. No one's sure if it's the saint's bone, the candlelight, or the onion you've been storing in your sleeve just in case. But the fear softens. The superstition becomes comfort. The rituals become rhythm. That night you kneel by your window and whisper a small thanks, not for being cured, but for feeling less cursed. Then you sneeze, only once, and you smile, because this time you bless yourself. It's late. The kind of night where the wind feels like it's whispering and your candle refuses to stay lit. You've wrapped yourself in 2 cloaks, 3 scarves, and your most reassuring blanket. But still the air feels strange, thick, watching. You sit up in bed. Your nose twitches. You sneeze. Once. No big deal. Then again. Twice. You wait. Heartbeat loud in your ears. Then a third. Achoo. And suddenly it hits you. It's after midnight. And you just sneezed 3 times in a row. Alone. In the dark. You freeze. Because somewhere buried in the layers of folk memory and whispered warnings, you remember what that means. They say if you sneeze 3 times after midnight with no one around to bless you, your soul slips sideways. Not dead, not cursed, just misaligned, wandering. It's one of those stories the elders tell when the fire's low and the wind howls louder than the chimney draft. 1 sneeze at night is nothing. 2, possibly moon sickness. But 3, that's when the veil thins. You light your candle. The wick sputters. You wrap your scarf tighter and whisper to the room, "Bless me." You feel silly. You say it again, louder this time. The wind knocks on the shutters. You grab Gerald the sneeze stone, clutch him to your chest, and try to breathe slowly. This is nonsense. But also, what if it's not? You remember your neighbor's tale of her grandfather who sneezed thrice in the night and woke up speaking in riddles. Or the milkmaid who claimed to see ghosts for 3 days after her midnight sneezes. Or Bertram's unsolicited theory that night sneezing allows evil humors to escape in reverse. Historians still argue whether night sneezes were truly feared or just part of local superstition. But records from Abby's journals and letters suggest that something about sneezing in the darkness made people uneasy, maybe because it's when the body is most vulnerable, or maybe because no one's there to bless you. And without the blessing, the fear creeps in. You get out of bed, feet cold against the stone floor, and find your bottle of vinegar. You dab some under your nose. Then you find your St. Sebastian ribbon and tie it around your wrist. You chant a psalm, any psalm. You forget the numbers. You whisper, "Let the wind pass me by." You light all 3 of your candles. You sit in the glow. You wait. You don't sneeze again, but you don't sleep either. The next morning you're exhausted. Your nose feels like sandpaper. Your eyes are sore, but you're still here. You mention it to Bertram over stale bread. 3 sneezes after midnight, he repeats, raising an eyebrow. Oh yes, that's a classic soul shift. You'll want to walk backward through a doorway this afternoon, just to realign. You do it 3 times. Backwards, forwards, backwards. Your dog watches, unimpressed. That evening, the sun sets earlier than usual. The air grows thick again. You think about sneezing, and your nose begins to tickle as if on cue. But you hold steady. You breathe through your mouth. You hum softly to confuse your own breath. When the tickle passes, you whisper, "Thank you" to no one in particular. And just in case, you tie a fresh onion over your bedpost. Because there's something uniquely unsettling about sneezing alone at night. No one to hear it, no one to bless it. Just you, the shadows, and the faintest hint of fear that maybe, just maybe, that third sneeze took something with it. By now, you've accepted that sneezing has become more than a reflex. It's a social signal, a spiritual risk, a political event, a medical riddle, and lately, a border control issue. Because today, you walk to the edge of town with a sack of flour and find the gates shut, not locked, just shut, with a man standing in front of them, holding a sign that reads, "If you sneeze, turn back." You pause. The man narrows his eyes. "Have you sneezed in the last 24 hours? You open your mouth to answer, and then sneeze. Once. Soft, barely audible. He gasps like you just confessed to sorcery. "Out," he says. "Back. Away." You take a step back. "I'm just delivering flour," you explain. He shakes his head. "Flour doesn't sneeze. You do." And just like that, you're quarantined. In the village bakery courtyard, surrounded by sacks of wheat and 3 other sniffly citizens. One woman has hay fever. One boy inhaled cinnamon. One old man claims he's allergic to daylight. Welcome to the sneeze line. This new boundary appeared practically overnight. Some merchant in a neighboring town allegedly brought a cough with him, and suddenly every community has a perimeter, a sneeze checkpoint, and a small stack of miasma masks made of beeswax and cloth. You're not sick. You just look like you might be. That's enough. The town council issued a list of symptoms that warrant suspicion. Sneezing, obviously, watery eyes, excess blinking nose, touching loud breathing, and looking too pale or too pink. Historians still argue how effective these early containment methods were. Some towns isolated entire families if one person coughed. Others marked sneeze-prone houses with red cloths on the door and forbade visitors. In desperate moments, people were walled in, literally bricked into homes until the danger passed. You consider yourself lucky. You're only stuck behind a rope barrier, being watched by a boy, holding a pot of vinegar and a long stick. He pokes the air near your face. "Just checking," he mutters. The idea is that sneezing means sickness, and sickness means plague, and plague means, well, death and taxes, mostly. No one wants that. You're told to wait 6 hours. During this time, your fellow detainees form a sneezing support group. The hay fever woman shares dried mint. The cinnamon boy whittles a tiny bird. The old man recites riddles, one of which makes you sneeze again. The rope guard winces. You mouth, "Sorry." Across the path, you see a man selling access permits, little slips of parchment that say, "I have not sneezed." He's stamping them with a potato and a bit of ink. People are buying them like bread. You want one. You can't have one. You are a sneezer. Eventually, Father Odric appears. He blesses each of you and waves a censer of smoke so thick you all start coughing. He declares the area ritually clean, though the boy with the stick looks skeptical. Finally, the gate opens. You're allowed through, but not before someone chalks a mark on your sleeve. A warning, the guard says, in case you start again. You look down. It's the symbol for wind, or maybe for sin. The chalk is smudged. Back in the village, you feel eyes on you. People shift, murmur. Some smile thin and wary. Others cross the street. You're marked, not as cursed, not as sick, just as potentially contagious. And there's no appeal process. That night you sit by your fire and try not to sneeze. You wrap your face in cloth. You boil sage and breathe the steam. You put Gerald on your lap like a comfort stone. But it still happens. One small sneeze. You whisper, "Bless me." Then you sigh, because you know that tomorrow you'll face the sneeze line again. And maybe the rope will be thicker, or the boy with the stick will be stricter. And maybe one day, no one will remember why sneezing scared them so much. Only that it did. And that people like you had to stand outside, waiting for the wind to pass. The birds arrive just before dawn, not pigeons or sparrows. No, these are the masked birds, doctors. They claim draped in thick black cloaks, wearing wide-brimmed hats, and the unmistakable beaked masks that have come to mean only one thing: plague patrol. You've heard rumors of them traveling physicians who enter infected towns, not with gentle words or holy blessings, but with beaks full of herbs, staffs for prodding, and attitudes that suggest they trust no one, not even the air. This morning, 2 of them arrive in your village, gliding silently, like shadows, across the square. Children hide behind barrels. Dogs bark once, then think better of it. Even Bertram, with all his theories about liver winds and spleen steam, steps aside and gives them a respectful nod. You watch from your doorway, a scarf pulled over your mouth, and wait. One of them points at a man who coughed near the baker's stall. The man is immediately surrounded. The bird-masked figure waves a staff, and someone behind them begins rubbing crushed thyme onto the man's wrists. They leave a packet of what looks like charcoal and cinnamon. No words are exchanged. The masked doctor scribbles something in a book and moves on. It is one of the most intimidating things you've ever seen. You blink and sneeze softly, and suddenly a beaked mask turns toward you. You freeze, but the figure only tilts their head, watches a moment longer, then moves along. You exhale, because these doctors may look like nightmares, but they represent authority, fear, and in some strange way, hope. If someone's brave enough to walk into plague towns wearing a mask stuffed with rose petals and vinegar-soaked linen, then maybe there's a chance we won't all end up buried in a lime pit. You hear Bertram muttering behind you. The beak is a chimney for evil humors, he says, admiring their design. See the curve, it channels death away from the face. You glance at him. That's not in any scroll, you point out. It should be, he replies. The mask itself is meant to protect. The beak is filled with strong herbs, lavender, mint, camphor, wormwood, meant to purify the air before it reaches the lungs. The eyes are covered with dark glass to ward off miasma, and the whole outfit creates distance, not just physical, but emotional. You don't hug a plague doctor. You don't chat. You follow instructions, and you hope. Historians still debate whether these masks were truly effective or just theatrical. Some believe they provided basic filtration, which helped. Others think the masks did more to frighten than to heal, turning doctors into omens. A walking prophecy of sickness and of judgment. In your village, they do both. They go door to door. They leave behind little bundles of herbs. They post notices if someone in your household sneezes, coughs, or appears overly moist. They are to be reported. No one wants to be reported. That night, your neighbor tries to hold in a sneeze and bursts a blood vessel in his eye. The masked figures return. They place a ring of sulfur around his bed. His wife is told to sleep outside. She does. You don't sleep much. You dream of bird faces, sharp beaks, and silence. The next day, one of the doctors visits you. He doesn't speak. He just holds out a pouch. You take it with both hands. Inside, dried rosemary, 2 cloves, a coin-sized wax tablet stamped with a tiny beak. You nod in thanks. He taps your forehead gently with the tip of his staff, then leaves. You don't know what it meant, but you wear the pouch anyway, around your neck, all day, because even if the medicine is flawed, even if the theory is shaky, the ritual is powerful. You boil the herbs. You place the wax on your door. You sleep with the scent of cloves in your nostrils. And when you sneeze that night, no one comes to check. No one knocks. No one leaves garlic at your doorstep. You're marked now, not as safe, not as sick, but as watched. And strangely, that makes you feel just a little more seen. By now, your sneezes have a schedule. Morning, soft, polite. Midday, sharp warning. Evening, dramatic, theatrical, capable of making a candle flicker across the room, and every time someone still notices, a glance, a step back, a murmured, "Bless you," with just a hint of suspicion underneath. But today, as the sky glows with the pink edge of summer's end, something different happens. You don't sneeze, not once. You wake up. You sip your time tea. You tend your shoes. You visit the chapel. And through it all, your nose remains entirely still. No tickle, no twitch, no betrayal. You feel free. You walk through the market without a scarf over your face. You carry no garlic. You forget Gerald, the sneeze stone on your shelf, and don't feel the need to run home for him. The baker waves at you with both hands, an old sign of trust, meaning, "I'm not holding a clove." You wave back. It feels like recovery, not just from illness, but from the constant mental weight of wondering if your next sneeze might exile you, curse you, or trigger someone else's panic. But then, halfway through the town square, you see something that makes you pause. A child sneezing. She's no older than 8, wrapped in too many layers, hair wild, nose red. She sneezes once, twice, then a third time. No one says a word. You look around. The crowd shifts. Subtly, people avert their gaze. The apothecary straightens, ajar eyes fixed firmly away. The girl's mother whispers something and pulls her hood tighter. No blessing, no comfort, no charm, just silence. And that more than all the potions, scrolls, relics, and herbs you've tried makes you understand. You step forward, kneel slightly, and say softly, "Bless you." The girl blinks, sniffs, smiles. The mother nods, eyes brimming. You walk on, and as you do, people begin to notice. A man sneezes, another nods in blessing. A woman wipes her nose and chuckles. The air shifts. Not the wind, but the weight of fear, because sneezing never stopped being natural. It just stopped being forgiven. You sit at the edge of the well and breathe deeply. Still no sneeze. But if one comes, if tomorrow or next week, your body decides to protest the dust or the hay or the world again, you know you'll let it. You won't flinch. You won't hide. And you'll whisper to yourself with the calm certainty of someone who has survived superstition and scrolls, vinegar compresses, and bird masks. Bless me. Because maybe that's what we all need. Not the herbs, not the relics. Just the reminder that even in the smallest, loudest, least controllable moments, we are still worthy of compassion. And then, Achoo. There it is. After all this time, you smile. No one runs. A voice behind you says, "Bless you." Another chimes in, "And may it carry only peace." You turn nod, and for the first time you sneeze, without fear. The night settles gently over your village, a blanket of soft air and fading sound. Shutters close with a creak, candles flicker low behind glass, and the streets fall quiet, not from dread, but from rest. You lie in bed, wrapped in your blankets, feeling the weight of the day lift with each breath. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of stories of trial, overcome, of laughter behind cloth masks, and sneezes that no longer feel like secrets. Your home smells of lavender and old wood. The nosegay above your bed has dried into a small bouquet of calm. Even Gerald, the stone, rests in peace, forgotten for now, beside a pile of folded scarves that no longer guard your breath. You stare at the ceiling beams and let your mind wander. To the first time you panicked over a sneeze. To the masked figures, the rope barriers, the scrolls and chants, the night when 3 sneezes felt like a death sentence. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still you. The wind hums softly outside, slipping through cracks and over rooftops. Not a threat anymore, just a song of things passing through, of movement, of life. You turn on your side, The room darkens. The silence deepens. And in that quiet you feel a lightness. Not because sneezing is gone, but because the fear has gone with it. You are whole. You are safe. And whatever the air brings tomorrow, you'll meet it with softness, eyes closed, heart steady, and maybe, just maybe, a little smile behind the next sneeze.